Hi, here we are with Beowulf, our first work of the semester, and maybe perhaps one of the most popular right off the bat. Part of its popularity stems from the fact that, well, Beowulf sort of inspired Tolkien to write The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien being an Old English scholar. And Lord of the Rings inspired the creation of what we might call high fantasy literature, the Game of Thrones, for instance, and so many others. So what is it about this world? What is it about this world that has been so interesting and draws people in? Well, I want you to consider something, first of all. The distance between us and them. And I don't just mean time, although there's a lot of time, right? There's over 1,000 years between us and the initial writer of the poem, right? The one who wrote it down in the form that we know, about 1,000 words. But indeed, the poem may have existed in oral form for perhaps as many as 400 years before that. Okay. There's not a lot of external markers that guide time except for one reference to a particular historical person, which then places it around the 600s. But beyond that, we just don't know. It's a very distant world. It is not a world like ours where we have modern conveniences, computers, smartphones. Oh my gosh, forget about those. Cars. How about just running water? Regular homes. As for food, I go to Ralph's or Vaughn's, Albertsons. I don't have to kill anything to eat, generally speaking, unless I really want to go out fishing or hunting. But beyond that, I don't need to do that whatsoever. Right? It's all done already. Okay. This enters into what I think is a really critical thing to understand. We live in a time of civilization. Okay, I mean, there's just no two bones about it, right? Yes, nature still exists, but heck, we often have to drive pretty far just to experience anything like nature. Or you go out into the ocean on boats and ships, sure. Take a cruise, for instance, and experience the water. I wonder what Beowulf and his men would have thought about being on a cruise ship. The point is, for the people, the characters in Beowulf's time and in the story Beowulf, nature is not some beautiful place of peace and relaxation in which to get away from the rat race of civilization. Nature is actually very dangerous. Nature, you could say, is the enemy. And it's very, very, very hard to overcome that. This is one of the things that's so important about the building of Heorot, right? It's a kind of a place that establishes civilization in a world of chaos. A little sense of order. And of course, Grendel comes and messes with that. Now, the people in this poem are largely what we might call tribal. We don't have these big, huge nation states that we do today, right? We might say, oh, they're all Scandinavians. Yeah, by our view, but they're much more divided up, right? And who you are is very much a function of who you come from, your parentage, your lineage. You notice when people introduce themselves to somebody else, they talk about not themselves first. Or Beowulf talks about his lineage, because who he is his father and his father's father, etc. Sometimes they do that to establish a common bond, an alliance, if you will. But it's more than just that. This is part of the sense of identity. Even Grendel has to have a lineage. Grendel's lineage goes back to Cain, character from the book of Genesis, of course. Because you can't just have somebody pop up out of nowhere. This is very opposite of, the American ethos that you might see expressed in a work like Huckleberry Finn, where a character just remakes himself and remakes himself and remakes himself, and whoever he was before, whoever he really was, doesn't matter, right? In Beowulf, oh yes, it does. It's very much who you are, your place in the world is very much established that way. And that leads us also to a discussion of Wergild. Wergild. Literally, man price. Everybody has a value. Everybody has a price. And I mean a literal price, like a money price. And who you are, what your value is dependent on, your status within that society. If you're king or related to the king, you're more valuable. Peasants? Peasants are a dime a dozen. Throw them in a bushel basket. So Wergild, here's the thing with Wergild. Let's say you were in a battle, a conflict of some kind, and somebody kills a member of your family. Wergild says you have to go out and avenge that killing. Now, this is not that uncommon. You can think Hatfields and McCoys, right? Kind of this always going back and forth, somebody killing somebody then coming back and killing somebody. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, kind of thing never stops, right? Now you can put a pause to it with money. Pay somebody off. You killed that person. Well, at that status, their rank, they were worth blah, 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 and pay it. There is evidence in the story that Beowulf's father killed somebody, and Hrothgar paid the Wergild. Beowulf's coming to help Hrothgar with Grendel is in some ways a way of paying his father's debt, right? A way of paying his father's debt. Now, Beowulf is a hero story, right? An old-fashioned hero story. By old-fashioned, I mean a hero of physical prowess, feats of war and strength, battle, that kind of thing. As we go through our time periods, right, hero stories can become much more complex. But the Beowulf story in that respect is not that complex. This is a fight. You could call it a fight between good and evil. You could call it a fight between civilization and nature, right? But there is clearly a battle. In fact, in this story, 3 battles. 3 battles that we care about the most. Beowulf battling Grendel, Beowulf battling Grendel's mother, and then Beowulf battling the dragon at the end of the poem. These 3 great battles comprise basically the majority of the poem and what the poem is about, what the story is about. Now, if you think about this, one of the overarching themes in Beowulf is doom. Even Beowulf, with this long, great life, will ultimately die. In his case, from the wounds from fighting the dragon. But actually, it's throughout the whole poem. If you really pay careful attention to the whole poem, the sense of doom is there incredibly early. When the poet talks about the building of Heorot and how wonderful this place is, the poet also talks about its burning down. So even as we're talking about it being created, we're talking about it being destroyed. This is a theme. And this is hard to escape, right? This sense of doom. Now, this is one of the conflicts, if you will, that kind of underlie this poem, because you have, as I'm sure you know, pagan characters, right? The characters are pre-Christian, but the Christian poet, the one who wrote it down for us somewhere in the year 1000 or thereabouts, is a Christian. And he has a certain value system that overlays his writing. Now, the values aren't completely incompatible, right? There is a value of bravery and loyalty, right? But it's hard to also reconcile this sense of doom with the Christian message of the resurrection, with the Christian message of eternal bliss in heaven. One of the things you may notice, if you're paying careful attention, if you're looking at the religious tension, the tensions of beliefs in the poem, is that there are allusions to Bible stories. But the Bible stories that are alluded to are entirely from the Old Testament. That's not an accident. Something to think about there as well. Okay. Now, talking about doom, one of my favorite subjects, you might want to consider taking a close look at the last survivor's speech. The theme of ubi sunt. Ubi sunt. Where are they? It's Latin. Where are they? Everybody's gone, right? The last survivor is the last person standing of his people. And it is a passage describing great loss. This wonderful, vibrant community that he was once a part of is now gone. And is gone because of war. Everlasting war. As I said, this concept of Vergil just means that somebody's going to come after you no matter what, right? Yeah, people try to make peace with money. They try to make peace with marriages, right? Marrying off a daughter from one family to the son of another family to try to join together and maybe heal a wound. But even within Beowulf himself doesn't believe that that will actually hold up. No matter how wonderful the people are that are involved in the marriage, no matter how virtuous they may be, it may not be enough to stop another war. War, death, destruction, all these things hang over the poem of Beowulf all the time. Think about this notion, right? Where does it go? Where does it lead to? Even for Beowulf, the great Beowulf. By the way, I have to include in this video my one observation that I seldom see people talk about in all this issue of family and the importance of tribe. Beowulf himself never produces an heir, never has a child that we hear about within the story, right? And in fact, when he needs people to fight the dragon, the people, the retainers that he has been so good to, abandoned him, right? Except for one, Wiglaf. Only Wiglaf stays. And Wiglaf, when the whole thing is over, he knows that when the neighbors, the warring, competitive tribes, right, the other groups of people, when they hear about how Beowulf's people ran and didn't support him, but ran instead, they will know that they are cowards. And they will come, and they will come, and they will come. And the feeling, quite frankly, is very much like what's going to happen to the Geats is what happened to whoever the last survivor was part of. Beginning on line 3150 is a passage. It's a very short passage, but it's very powerful. A Geat woman, too, sang out in grief with hair bound up. She unburdened herself of her worst fears, a wild litany of nightmare and lament. Her nation invaded, enemies on the rampage, bodies in piles, slavery and abasement. Heaven swallowed the smoke. This is what awaits. and they all know it.